Hello and welcome back to the Shakey Sonnet Show. I am Tootight, the drag laureate of the Sonnetarium, and here we are once again in the Sonnetarium at the bottom of the down staircase in the permanently sequestered remainder section of an unnamed local library, which may or may not have a couple of inscrutable lions on the front steps looking just pitiful. And what is that stamped upon their brows? Well, settle in and maybe we'll find out as we look closely at Sonnets 111 and 112. In Sonnets 109 and 110, we saw that things have gone squanchwise again for our narrator beloved with his new question mark beloved. I think his new beloved, because philanderers will be philandering. So we go from 109's never say that I was false of heart to 110's alas, 'tis true, I have gone here and there. And now we arrive at 111, which is pity me. And yes, pity me, the poor philanderer that I am, because I can't help it. That's just the way I am. I am what I am, my own special creation. Let's look a little bit more closely at 111 right now. Sonnet 111. Oh, for my sake do you with fortune chide, the guilty goddess of my harmful deeds, that did not better for my life provide than public means which public manners breeds. Thence comes it that my name receives a brand, and almost thence my nature is subdued to what it works in, like the dyer's hand. Pity me then, and wish I were renewed, whilst, like a willing patient, I will drink potions of easel, 'gainst my strong infection. No bitterness that I will bitter think, nor double penance to correct correction. Pity me then, dear friend, and I assure ye, even that your pity is enough to cure me. So I am what I am. It's not my fault. Blame that bitch goddess fortune if you want to blame anyone, because it's certainly not my fault that fortune made me the philandering fellow that I am. Now, some scholars contend that Sonnet 111 is somehow laced with references to Shakespeare's own life in the theater as an actor, as a playwright, as his public renown, because apparently theater people were thought to be tramps and scamps and scallywags and harlots. Oh my. But I happen to disagree because it suits my purpose. I do believe that line 2's my harmful deeds says enough for anyone. We don't need to know that Shakespeare was an actor, or even if he was, a monk, excuse me. Oh my goodness. I'm not gonna be Diana Ross and continue along as she does on Ed Sullivan with one earring. I'm gonna put it back on and sally forth. So whether the narrator is an actor or a monk doesn't matter. His harmful deeds have become public, or if not public, at least apparent to the maybe new beloved. And the first quatrain is an attempt to explain that exposure away. It's a stuttering exposure to explain that away. And I do mean stuttering because this sonnet is filled with words that begin with a lot of stuttering sounds, the THs and the percussives, the Ps and the Ks and the hard G sounds. And although we often place a lot of importance on the ends of words and at the ends of lines and the sounds at the ends of lines in rhymes, etc., I think it's worth considering the beginnings of words and the beginnings of lines. And this particular sonnet sounds to me a lot like sputtering. This but, sweetie darling, think about it, please. Just think about it. Don't let me drift away like thistledown on a wuthering day. It's kind of like I've been exposed as the philanderer that I am, but I am the philanderer that I am, and I can't quite escape that. So there we have the THs, the second line, third line, and fourth line, the guilty goddess. That did not better for my life provide, then public means which public manners breeds. If you're going to blame anyone, blame fortune. The second quatrain, again with a th, thence comes it that my name receives a brand. And almost thence, another thence, almost thence, my nature is subdued to what it works in, like the dyer's hand. Again, this stuttering thing, and it's my name receives a brand, not I've done something wrong, but this supremely passive, my name received a brand. Someone said something about something, they said someone said I did, and they mentioned my name. Imagine that. So it's again this stuttering thence and almost and thence. And then again, there's this weird thing where he does this line break at the second, in the second quatrain at the end of line 6. And almost thence, my nature is subdued, as if to say, my nature is subdued, I've been overpowered, I have had no choice, until we get to line 7. My nature is subdued to what it works in. Again, I am what I am. Like the dyer's hand. When dyers dye fabric, they get their hands the same color as the dye. And that's kind of what is happening with me. If I whore around town, it's only because that's what whores like me do. What can I do? I can't help it. Dyer's hands get dyed. Big whoop. So, because of that, pity me. And here we go. Pity me then, and these percussives with the pity and the thens with the stuttering. Pity me then, and wish I were renewed, whilst like a willing patience I will drink potions of eisel or eisel, E-I-S-E-L, which apparently was vinegar. I will drink potions of vinegar against any strong infection. And when you whore around all over town, there are lots of things you can catch. So a little dose of vinegar here or there might not be a bad thing. And there's no bitterness that I will bitter think. I won't think anything too bitter to drink. And there's no double penance that I can do. I will double and triple and quadruple my penance to correct correction, or have a correct correction. Pity me, lisping percussives. And I will just say, yes, I mean, there may be someone out there who says, but Tootight, don't you notice that the end words end with hard consonants, like the chide and the deed and the provide? I do notice that, but I contend that, excuse me, I contend that when you have a hard consonant after a long vowel, it's much more softened than if it's before a short vowel. So like in bread and dead in Sonnet 112, which we'll talk about later. But the long vowels, chide, deed, provide, and also there's the mitigating factor of the nasals and the liquids, the end in brand, the hand, the N in K, it sort of softens the sound at the end. So I'm focusing more on the percussives at the beginning of the word. So third quatrain, pity me. And I have lost my place. Oh, here it is. Your pity is the only thing that can cure my love. And here he does lay it on really pretty heavily with those percussives. The drink, the potions, the against, the bitterness, double penance, correct correction. And again, that's just to my point of the beginnings of words and the initial sounds creates this stuttering, flailing of an excuse. And then we get to the couplet. Pity me then. Again, doubling down from the doubling down in line 8, and then again in line 14. Pity me then, dear friend, and I assure ye, even that your pity is enough to cure me. So don't chide me for being a whore. Instead, pity me, because I just can't help myself. And if you pity me because I just can't help myself, then that will make it all better. For me, at least, because Sonnet 111 is all about me, and apparently not anything to do with you. So, pity, 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 pity. And speaking of pity, that takes us right into Sonnet 112, which starts with your love and pity. And here we go. Your love and pity doth the impression fill, which vulgar scandal stamped upon my brow. For what care I who calls me well or ill, so you o'ergreen my bad, my good allow? You are my all the world, and I must strive to know my shames and praises from your tongue. None else to me, nor I to none alive, that my steeled sense or changes right or wrong. In so profound bosom I throw all care of others' voices, that my adder's sense to critic and to flatterer stopped are. Mark how with my neglect I do dispense. You are so strongly in my purpose bred, that all the world besides me thinks you're dead. Okay, so Sonnet 112 is a problem sonnet. My first encounter with Sonnet 112 was listening to it hundreds and hundreds of times as Natasha Richardson was reciting it so that I could do a lip sync, which I finally did, and you can look at that below. But when I first encountered it, I read it, and I read the various versions of it because there are many different emendations of this particular sonnet. And each one left me even more confused, and I thought that I was just dumb. Turns out I'm okay. Sonnet 112 is a problem sonnet. Stephen Booth, in his wonderful book of Shakespeare sonnets, devotes 7 to 8 pages, which these pages are very small print, 7 to 8 pages of commentary on the problems in lines 7, 8, and 14. And if I were to ever teach a seminar on Shakespeare sonnets, a real seminar where I will have read all the sonnets before I start the seminar, unlike this where I'm doing it, I'm sort of living it as we go, I would assign Sonnet 112 and Stephen Booth's commentary, because he talks about Sonnet 112. That would be the very first assignment on the first day. He talks about it in such a way that is so comprehensive, and it encapsulates all of the art of Shakespeare's sonnet making. And I'll go into that a little bit later. Let's look at it. So we'll have to sort of squint our eyes and grunt our way through it just to get to some sort of gist of what might be going on here. Your love and pity, first quatrain, your love and pity doth the impression fill, which vulgar scandal stamped upon my brow. Apparently, felons had their foreheads branded and left a deep impression on their brows, and so this is the idea that you would make it up to cover it over. Also, there's the idea of an impression or an emotional impression, like as a pen does on a page. For what care I who calls me well or ill, so you o'ergreen my bad, my good allow. If you, all I care about is what you say. If you forgive me, you'll make it all better, and you'll, it's like spreading new seed on a lawn with a bunch of divots, and you'll basically make me a new man again, because your forgiveness is all that matters, because you're all that matters. And in the second quatrain, this is where it gets really, we have to grunt and squint. Keeping in mind the 111 sonnets that came before it. George Stevens, in a 1780 edition, calls Sonnet 12's lines 7 and 8 purblind and obscure. A kind way of saying it. But none else to me, nor I to none alive, that my steeled sense or changes right or wrong. This could mean, I think, this is what I think. You can make whatever I do seem right or wrong. Other people say you can make the steeled sense, you can make stubborn old me do anything right or wrong. But I think it's you can make whatever I do seem right or wrong. You're everything to me. You're the only one that matters to me. Anything you say goes. I know I've done you wrong, but whatever you say, I'll take the consequences for it. The third quatrain. In so profound abysm, I throw all care of others' voices, that my adder's sense to critic and to flatterer stopped are. Mark how with my neglect I do dispense. So apparently an adder was thought to be deaf, and it doesn't matter what anybody says about me. I'm going to stop my ears to it. All that matters is what you say about me. And by extension, you shouldn't really care what other people say about me either, because you're the only one that matters to me. Kind of a way to easel his way out of that. And then we get to the couplet. You are so strongly in my purpose bred. And I'm reading this version in John Kerrigan's version. You are so strongly in my purpose bred, that all the world besides me thinks they're dead. So nobody what matters in the world but me and you. We two are one. Let's stick together. Pity me, love me, forgive me, and let's continue on without a care about what anyone says about me or about you or about us. And that's the gist of Sonnet 112. And really, there's just too much to go into to grapple with everything and keep this video under 3.5 hours long. But Booth does the best job of it. Of all the editors that I've read, his 7 or 8 pages is really comprehensive and very good. And he says that he thinks that Sonnet 112 is, he says it's atypical of Shakespeare's sonnets only in that it is incomprehensible. And he believes it opens the possibility that Shakespeare went about constructing a sonnet with less emotion and more concern for fashioning a literary artifact. And while he admits that lines 7, 8, and 14 make no sense, he does think that they can be informative or suggestive of Shakespeare's sonnet construction methods. And just to give you an idea of what those might be, he believes that trademarks of Shakespeare's sonnet construction style includes his love of opposites and oppositions, both in words and in ideas. So in Sonnet 112, we have well and ill, good and bad, alive, dead, right, wrong, shames, praises, critic, flatterer, all, nothing. Shakespeare is also interested in ideational echoes or rhymes of ideas, or suggestions of multiple meanings. And for this, he chooses well and abysm. So what care I who calls me well or ill? We know that in this instance, well means who calls me something good or something bad. But because the word well also does have another definition, when we get to in so profound abysm, I throw all care, Booth says that because that word well is in our head, we can imagine there's the suggestion already of a well as a profound abysm. And Shakespeare does like to play around with that because he's a poet and he likes to play with language. He also likes to play with the sounds of words. There are some words that sound similar even though they have no connection to one another. World, when said aloud, can sound like word. Sense can sound like sins. Voices can sound like vices. And also, as Helen Vendler, with whom I rarely agree about anything she says about the sonnets, she does note the possibility of echoes with the Garden of Eden couple and this idea of a snake in the grass with all these S sounds and SH sounds. Scandal, stamped, strive to know, shames and graces, steeled sense or changes, abysm, other voices, adder sense. There is a snake in the grass feel to it. But Booth cautions readers to refrain from reducing any poem to just a puzzle that must be figured out. And that's sort of my problem with Helen Vendler. She does seem to do that. And when you reduce it to a puzzle, it often leads to misleading simplifications and just plain nonsense. Now, it's perfectly all right to think about the play of language within a poem and how a poet, the types of play that a poet is most fond of, and that's what Booth does in this essay. One other concern I have about this sonnet, I have not seen addressed by any of the editors that I've read, My first concern is that in the 1609 quarto, the colon is after "to critic and to flatterer stop it are." Then there's the colon at the end of line 11, and most editors place it at the end of line 12. And I understand that that's the easiest way, but a colon marks a separation, and when it's at the end of line 11, it reflects back upon everything that's just been said, rather than moving it to the end of 12. And that it does make sense to say, "Mark how with my neglect I do dispense," and then example, "You're so strongly in my purpose, Fred." I get it, but I don't like it, and I don't understand. I have not seen a convincing reason for why they think the colon was there in the first place in the 1609 quarto. My other big problem that nobody seems to have addressed is that Sonnet 112, the couplet, the end rhyme of the couplet, is the same end rhyme that occurs in Sonnet 104 and in Sonnet 108. In Sonnet 104, "For fear of which, hear this, thou age unbred, ere you were born was beauty's summer stead." And in 108, "Finding the first conceit of love there bred, where time and outward form would show it dead." And in 112, they're separated by fours, and we do know that Shakespeare liked to play around with numbers too. Again, we have bred and dead. So my question is, what's going on in 104 and 108 that might lead us to a better understanding of what Shakespeare may have wanted to culminate in Sonnet 112, where this final "bred and dead" comes. So if we look at it in Sonnet 4, the couplet is a 104. The couplet is a statement to a future age, and it's specifically about the beloved. The age is unbred, and the beloved, or his beauty, is dead. Sonnet 105, 106, 107, all is hunky-dory, praise, praise, everlasting love. Sonnet 108, where we have "Finding the first conceit of love there bred," there is either in the beloved, or in the beloved's body and his beauty, or the third possibility is in my verse. And the first passion of love is bred in the beloved's looks or the poet's sonnets, and it, in the 14th line, "where time and outward form would show it dead," it is either the beloved's body or the beloved's beauty, or possibly, people think that because I'm dead, my poetry is dead, but I'm not. So the outward show is that I'm dead, but my poetry will live on, which is Shakespeare's theme all along. Sonnet 109, 110, and 112, "Oops, I've cheated and you found out, and this good thing that we had is in danger." And then in Sonnet 12, "You are in my purpose bred." So the beloved merges with the poet's purpose, his poems. We've seen that before. My purpose is either my love for you or the poetry that I write about you. And then the very last line, "that all the world," in the 1609 quarto, "that all the world besides me," and these are two separate words, "me," "thinks," "y" apostrophe "are" dead. So editors have amended that "y" apostrophe "are" to be either "you are dead," or they've omitted the pronoun completely, "methinks are dead" with no one indicated, or they put, as Kerrigan does, "they're dead," because apparently there's an Old English letter called a thorn, which has the TH sound, and it looks like a P. It looks like a P, but instead of the hump at the top, I guess it's this way for you guys, it's more in the middle. And Elizabethan typesetters, the only thing that they could come close to when they put that in TypeScript was the letter Y, which explains signs like "ye old tea shop." It's actually "the old tea shop," and I never knew that, so I kind of learned something new. But "yar," I think, is a very strange contraction, and really nobody used it except for maybe Shakespeare and Betty Davis.
But ja, Blanche, ja.
Dr. Frankenstein side gig, which I will link below. You can peruse at your own pleasure. So perhaps perhaps as Booth suggests, Shakespeare hadn't quite decided who should be dead. But I think because the beloved is also my all the world, which is in line 5, and all the world are dead, it encapsulates both the beloved and all the world in one fell swoop. So you are in my purpose bred into my heart, into my poetry. You define me because you know my shames and graces, they only come from your tongue. You are alive to me even when everyone else thinks that you, my poetry, my love for you is dead. The upshot is you're killing me here. Without you, I'm nothing. Pity me, forgive me. And whatever the exact purport of this sonnet may be, it's pretty clear that our lovers are on pretty shaky ground. So, which is why we call it the Shaky Sonnet Show. Are there any genders specified? Well, no, there are not. Dramatically, themes of betrayal, love gone wrong, pleas for forgiveness could fit in anywhere in any of the plays. But it does seem like the sonnets are kind of the central spot where Shakespeare works out a lot of his preoccupations with love gone weird. So narratively, you can place these anywhere you like, and if you have a creative suggestion, I'd love to hear it. Narratively, I've already said these lovers seem to be on pretty shaky ground, and we will have to see what happens next. And it doesn't really matter who's dead in this sonnet. I'm not dead yet. And if you're watching this, you're not dead yet. And methinks all the world is filled with wonder. Pay attention. Until we meet again, I am Tootight. Check.